Amanda. Thanks for joining me again for part 2 of my series of 10 likes and 10 dislikes about living in Toronto. Today I'm going to be discussing my 10 dislikes about living in Toronto. And as I ended my last video, the 10 likes with transit, I'm going to start my 10 dislikes with transit as well and list kind of the negative sides of the transit system here. So let's get started. Number 1, the TTC. I ended my last video talking about how accessible transit was, but there is also a downside to Toronto Transit Commission. Number 1, compared to other cities with similar or larger transit infrastructure, Toronto's very costly as far as what they charge people for fares. As of right now, I believe it is $3.25 one way for TTC. They do have these, they call them Presto cards. They're little cards that you load up with money and you tap it when you get on and off. So you get a slight discount. I believe the discount's only like 10 cents or something like that. But yes, compared to other cities with larger transit systems, the cost of fare here is quite high. Also, the technology that they are using is very out of date. It's very archaic. Even the TAP system I just talked about has already been replaced with better technology in other countries. So that is also another downside to the TTC. The tracks are constantly being upgraded or under construction, or something's going on with them. So we constantly have closures and delays on the subway lines. Toronto's a construction city, so there's always buses and streetcars that are being delayed because of constant construction blocking traffic or whatnot. There are limited actual subway lines. There is Line 1, which runs north and south. There is Line 2 that runs east and west. And then there is a third short line that is an uptown, and it only runs from the center to the east, just a few stops. It doesn't go very far. So compared to other cities with subway systems, this is very far behind. There are other cities that have huger networks of subway lines, and we still only have 2.5. And it's the TTC has had some issues with mismanagement in the past. Pretty much since I've lived here, there's always been some sort of controversy, somebody being fired, somebody being hired, mismanagement of money, having to petition the province for more money or handouts because they can't manage the money that they have already, constantly raising fares to make up for the fact that they're mismanaging money. So that's also another downside of transit here, as well as there are a few overnight buses that run and streetcars, but a very few compared to the size of the city. For the most part, if you have to go home, say you work in a bar or something, you have to go home at 1 in the morning, it's going to take you a long time to get home because the subways are closed. Most of the bus routes end at like 10:30 or 11. Sorry, the subway closes at 2. But yeah, most of the bus routes are closed at 10:30 or 11. And so you have to rely on the blue light lines, which are the few that do run 24 hours. So it can be tricky even just getting home if you don't work conventional hours. Number 2, noise pollution. It seems, and it's probably with any city, not just a Toronto issue, but it seems like there is no escape from noise. I do happen to live on a very, very busy road, one of the arteries of the city. And so rush hour times, I mean, there's general noise going back and forth from passing traffic or whatnot. But if I'm home during the week, Rush hour times are just awful because people will they'll be backed up in front of my living room honking their horns. Or the morning, say I'm not working on a weekday morning and I want to sleep in. I can't do that because my bedroom is 20 feet from the road where cars are backed up honking their horns or laying on their horns. So there's no escape from traffic noise. There's also a lot of noise as far as people speaking. You cannot escape constant talking. I'm kind of an introvert naturally, and I do value any kind of peaceful time that I can have to just myself, but it's nearly impossible when you live in the city because there's always loud conversations going on around you, people listening to music on the subway with their earphones blasting so that everyone else has to listen to it, or just not even using earphones at all and just letting it play from, you know, their phone speaker. So that's a constant noise. I do live in a flight path, so there's constant jets going by all the time, and so that can be quite bothersome as well. Not to mention that, like, right now we're starting construction season here, and so we've got constant construction noise going on. Some people do have it worse than others. Like right now, my immediate neighborhood doesn't have any construction going on, but a short walk away, there are condo buildings going up, and the people who are already living in that part of the neighborhood, it's just been miserable for them. And you know, those projects take a long time, so they've been dealing with it for a couple years now. So yeah, the constant noise and the inability to really escape from the noise, unless you go down on one of the trails and get into the ravines, it's a struggle. Number 3, crowds. There are crowds everywhere. You can't walk anywhere without having to dart around people or step out of someone else's way, because I'm a slow walker, so and people in the city get very irritated with slow walkers. I happen to have a reason that I walk slow, is I have a blown out knee, and so I kind of limp along at my own pace. But in the city, people get very irritable whenever somebody is walking too slow. So crowds can be an issue for that for me. Also, you just can't escape it. There's people everywhere. There are people everywhere. Even if there's an event, if there's an event going on, you can understand there are going to be crowds. But even when there aren't events, there's just so many people. You just really can't escape it. Number 4, multiculturalism. Now, this can be a delicate topic, so I'm going to try to be as respectful as possible. But I find that while there are blessings with multiculturalism, there can be some real frustrations as well. Going along with the noise pollution, it's constantly hearing people speaking loudly in other languages around you. It's bad enough when someone's speaking loudly on the phone or in just a face-to-face conversation and they're speaking the same language as you, but you add in that element of another language, and it's just it adds confusion, and for me, it triggers, I have anxiety disorder, so it triggers that for me because I can't understand. Also with multiculturalism, there are issues that do arise with clashes in culture, clashes in politics, clashes in religious views, ethics, values. These things are going to come up. I have also noticed that I've never lived outside of Toronto in Canada, so I don't know exactly what it is like on the outside. But from my perspective, I have lived here quite some time now, I have observed that it's sort of like a melting away of Canadian identity, Canadian culture, what it is to be Canadian. It's sort of melting away to allow to allow room for these other cultures, which, as I explained in my 10 likes of Toronto, multiculturalism can be a wonderful thing. It can be a great way to exchange your cultures and celebrate them. But there is an ugly side to that that does pop up every now and then that I observe. And it's not necessarily my viewpoints, but these are the things that I've observed, that the issues that do pop up here. More so in recent years, it's sort of a snowballing effect that there is now a battle starting to brew between nationalists and on immigration policies and whatnot. So that is an ugly side of the multiculturalism and here, and trying to learn to live with each other and embrace each other. And I find that from my perspective, being an American, in America, you welcome people in. I'm talking pre-Trump. You welcome people in and you embrace them and they become American. You know your past, your culture and your ethnicity and whatnot, but then you become American, and that becomes your culture, and that becomes your identity. In Canada, it's different. Multiculturalism is different. You've got all these cultures coming together and trying to live their own culture amongst each other, rather than just becoming Canadian and having their identity become Canadian. I am Canadian now. I was that. This is my background, but I am Canadian. And that's the difference for me between multiculturalism and the melting pot that is in the U.S. Number 5, passive aggressiveness. I don't know if it is the British roots in Canada, but as the British are known for being passive aggressive, so are the Canadians from my experience. They don't like conflict. They will avoid it at all costs, even if that means not speaking their minds or getting a straight answer out of them. Even a commitment, say, hey, can you come help me move this chair on Saturday? You can't get a strong commitment from somebody that, yeah, they'll say yeah because they don't want to say no. So, so that's kind of a struggle with the passive aggressiveness here. So that and me, I'm even though I'm introverted naturally, when I need to speak my mind, I speak my mind. I am very frank in that regard. I don't like to beat around the bush. I just like to get direct answers and get things done. So so that's kind of a frustrating for me. 6, the weather. In Toronto, you have very hot, sticky, muggy summers, and you have very frigid, freezing cold winters that last forever. Winter here can easily, you can see your first snowfall, not necessarily a deep snowfall, but you can see a dusting. I've seen it even late October, all the way through. We've had snow in May before, not this year, but we have in the past. So the winters do last forever, and people aren't very good in the city here about clearing their sidewalks. Businesses do, because the city really targets businesses as far as the bylaws go and clearing the sidewalks. The city will go after the businesses, but homeowners kind of get away with it. You can have, somebody will have a deep snowfall, somebody won't clear their sidewalk for days, and then by that time it's compacted down from foot traffic and turned into solid ice, so there's no removing it. So it's pretty much there until it evaporates, because that's what it does here. The snow stays around the ground for the entire winter. It does not melt. It stays on the ground for the whole winter. However, because it's so cold, it will evaporate and eventually get smaller and disappear that way. But I mean, it's always replaced by more snow. So by the end of the winter, we have quite a bit of snow covering our lawns. But yeah, that's one of the worst things. And The fall and the spring might as well not exist. They're like 2 weeks long each, which kind of sucks for me because autumn is my favorite season. I love when I'm more active in the autumn. I love to get out and be in nature more in the autumn time. So it's kind of a bummer for me that while the autumns are beautiful here, they're just beautiful because of all of the deciduous trees. It doesn't last long enough to truly enjoy it. So that's one of the downsides. Weather. Number 7, construction season. Between the last snowfall and the first snowfall is construction season. It seems to last forever, and it disrupts traffic. There's constant dust and dirt and grossness in the air. It's noisy and noise pollution. You just cannot escape construction season here. Right now we are in a boom of construction. There's so many condos going up in this city, and so it disrupts everything about the city, all of the road blockages. And then that's just, in the major parts. You get into the neighborhoods, and construction season also applies here. People are remodeling their homes. If it's a do-it-yourself, somebody doing it themselves. I had a person across the street from me. Took him 4 years to remodel his house. He just finished this year. And all that time, every single weekend, first thing in the morning, everybody's woken up to the sound of hammers or buzzsaws or whatever was going on. So that's a very frustrating part of living in Toronto is construction season. Number 8, protest season. Toronto has a lot of fair weather protesters. These are people who seem to only care about causes when it's sunny and warm and they can dress half naked and block intersections while holding signs and chanting. I do agree with some of the issues that they protest, but I think there's a better, more constructive way of going about it rather than halting traffic in a city that's already has traffic issues and due to construction and whatnot. So yeah, protest season is so annoying. It's up there with mosquitoes for me. It's just a very annoying part of living in Toronto. Number 9, the cost of living. In Toronto's a very, very, very expensive city with very, very, very expensive real estate. And that is passed along also to very, very, very expensive rental housing prices. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Your taxes are higher here, significantly more than the States. The cost of groceries is more here. When I did my first grocery shopping trip after moving here from the States, in the States, a normal grocery haul for me was about $40. When I moved to Canada, that instantly doubled. My first grocery shopping trip here was $80, and it blew my mind. I could not even believe it. The cost of dairy here is outrageous because it's so managed by the government that it's crippling to the industry itself. It's so expensive, people can't afford it. Not to mention other grocery items that are just astronomically priced here. The cost of gas is more here, significantly more here. There's also the cost of insurance for a vehicle. When I lived in the States, my car had absolute full coverage through an amazing insurance company, and I paid $20 a month for full coverage. Sorry, excuse me. I paid $60 a month. Sorry, not 20. I paid $60 a month for absolute full coverage through an amazing insurance company. I came to Canada and the lowest quote I ever got was $230. That is with a clean driving record. I've been driving since 1991 and I have a clean driving record, and the lowest quote I could get was $230 per month. So it just blows my mind how expensive insurance is here. But they also do have a lot of collisions here. I do find that the province doesn't do a very good job of making sure people are able to drive when they give them licenses. They do go through, you know, a written test and a driving test and whatnot. But I feel like some of these people are floating by on that driving test, because some people get behind the wheel and you have no clue how they pass that test. They can't parallel park. They run stop signs. It's weird to me. But yeah, the cost of living is a huge crippling factor with living in Toronto. You just can't get around it. Everything costs more, you know, groceries, entertainment, travel, everything. And last but not least, number 10, the topography. Toronto is incredibly flat. There is a small rise here around Midtown from downtown. As you come off the lake, downtown's very flat. There is a small rise just as you get to my area in Midtown, and then it continues just being flat north. The exceptions to this are the escarpment region, which is the area that was carved out when the glaciers, you know, a billion years ago or whenever it was, when the glaciers traveled down, they carved out this escarpment. But that's not in Toronto, so you have to drive about an hour to get to that. But here in Toronto, it's very, very flat. The only topography here are high-rises, high-rise buildings and skyscrapers. That's the topography here. And a downside to that is you can feel very closed in and claustrophobic in conditions like this. Like you can't escape. It surrounds you. I'm also biased because of where I grew up, where I am from, where I have lived most of my life. There are mountains and volcanoes and valleys and canyons and all of this beautiful topography. So I am a bit spoiled and I am biased when I go to viewing Toronto. Don't get me wrong, Toronto is a very pretty city. They've done a very good job about keeping a tree canopy here. Most of the city is treed. But even with trees, you still can't escape that feeling that it is just flat and there are no views. Well, that concludes my 10 likes and 10 dislikes of living in Toronto. I hope this was enjoyable for you. I do keep everything, take everything with a grain of salt. Nothing I say is set in stone. It's just my observations. It's my opinions. I don't want to upset anybody with anything I've said. So if you have any contributions to the discussion, go ahead and leave them down below. I will read everything and I will respond to everything. But do keep in mind, this is just based on my experience. My experience isn't going to be like anybody else's, so I'm open to hearing how other people have experienced living in Toronto or Canada in general. But at this point, I want to send this challenge along to a Foxy Mess. She lives in Calgary, and she has, although she's Canadian, she has lived in the States, and I do know that she enjoyed living in the States. So I'm very curious to see her do her 10 likes and 10 dislikes about living in Calgary. So do run over to her channel. I will link it in the bio below. Go check it out when she posts it, and share the love. But until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.